Taking a look at the latest in show cattle and some of the different events, did you ever wonder what the paper trail's like? Well, I'm going to visit with Dr. Lowell Midla as he takes a look at one of the shows across the country and requirements. Dr. Midla, I guess first we ought to set the stage. This is the Ohio Beef Expo, and I guess that makes a difference when you start to figure out health papers, where things are coming from and going to. Before we get into all the papers, tell us a little bit about what's the overall purpose of having a veterinarian on location during a weekend event like this?
The underlying goal is to provide assurance to the buyer that the animal is coming in without a contagious or infectious disease. That's what I sign, a piece of paper that says this animal is free of contagious and infectious disease. Primarily in the United States, we monitor brucellosis and tuberculosis.
As you take a look at those two diseases, some states are free of that, so they're allowed to move in the state without any problems, but sometimes the buyer's not exactly where you thought they might be, therefore the next step.
Yes, that's correct. The requirements to get into the state of Ohio from other states are relatively minimal because Ohio is TB and brucellosis free. Most other states are TB and brucellosis free. The general requirement is just a certificate of veterinary inspection to indicate that a vet has seen them and they don't require any tests. However, some other states require more extensive testing, or, for example, there are some western states, particularly those that border Yellowstone Park, that require that the animals females must have been calfhood vaccinated against brucellosis, and that's an official vaccination that a veterinarian has to do. So if an animal were to sell from the Beef Expo to, say, Idaho, it must have been calfhood vaccinated.
So some of those things, I guess, as you're working through some paperwork, you're trying to figure out which ones come sale time, things are already set, and some other cases, are there some things I need to confirm where the buyer is to know whether this paperwork can move on?
Yes, that's correct. It makes it difficult because, once again, in most cases, for example, a bull that came from Ohio that is selling back into Ohio, there are no tests needed for that. But if it were to go to some of these other states, and some of them nearby, for example, Pennsylvania would require testing, brucellosis testing, and depending on age, tuberculosis testing for a bull to move in from Ohio to Pennsylvania. So what we do is make sure that at minimum the state of destination has a record of that animal coming in so they can follow up if in case there's a problem. And if the animal doesn't have the required tests, then we try to make arrangements so that it can get those tests to go there.
And I guess that's a big point of it. In today's world, having a paper trail of where something started, where it was, and where it ended up is a major portion of overall animal health, regardless of what kind of animal it might be.
Yes, that's correct, and that's the system developed by USDA and the individual official veterinarians of each state. They call them the veterinarian in charge. So there's a lot of autonomy from state to state. I mean, that's God bless the USA. That's how we do things. Each state has their own requirements, and that's okay. But then there's also the USDA behind that, following up, and the underlying mechanism for detection and detecting the spread of disease is to follow it with a CVI, Certificate of Veterinary Inspection, and that's what most people refer to as a health paper.
Overall, will you do a general walk through the barn and kind of get an assessment of overall animal health, if any concerns, or if it is, somebody's probably already come into the office to point it out for you?
Absolutely. Tomorrow when I sign a paper, I'm signing that I have inspected the animal and found it to be free from contagious and infectious disease. So I'll walk through the barns today and inspect every animal and look for overt signs of clinical disease.
Contrast, if you will, is there a difference in the health requirements and let's stick with Ohio for ease of convenience now, from an animal that's going to be sold versus a junior show where an animal is going to be retained by the same owner but go in and out of a certain location?
Sure, absolutely. There are no requirements. It used to be that even to bring an animal to a show, even within Ohio, there was a requirement that a health paper be written. Now, in general, unless the individual show requires it, there is no requirement for a health paper for travel specifically for exhibition within Ohio. To the best of my knowledge.
Next step, if you wanted to go to Louisville or you wanted to go to Denver, there are papers, and check with your local vet and the show for requirements.
Yeah, the best bet. I'm a practicing veterinarian, so what I ask my clients to do is to not only tell me where they're going, for example, going to Louisville, but furthermore have the piece of paper, the catalog, the sale catalog, or the show requirements in the barn, so I can read it at the time that we're doing the tests. And that is the best way for producers to be assured that they will have met the requirements for that sale. And if they meet those requirements, then it's the sales fault, not their fault, that they didn't do what they needed to do.
Meet the requirements, dot the I's, cross the T's. If you have questions, be sure to ask them before you take on the next traveling event, no matter what kind of livestock show you might be attending. I've been visiting with Dr. Lowell Midla, as he's the veterinarian on call for the Ohio Beef Expo. Until next time, I'm Dale Minio. We'll see you down the road.
Down the Road is brought to you in part by Prince Agra, makers of Omnigen AF, advancing animal nutrition for healthy animals, and Woodruff Enterprise of Springfield, Ohio,